Some trim levels of the Cadillac SRX have some really cool headlight tech. Things like automatic headlight washers, and lights that automatically level depending on your speed and sweep side to side as you turn right and left. But no matter what trim level your Cadillac SRX is, all of the headlights share one common feature, and that is really poor headlight seal design. And nearly 10 years after the second generation Cadillac SRX originally released, GM still refuses to truly admit that they have a problem. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the problem. We're going to talk about a cheap way to fix the problem. And in the second half of the video, we're going to talk about something I've been seeing popping up on various SRX forums the last few weeks. Buzz about a possible recall, a lawsuit about these headlights, and GM's response. But first, let's talk about how to fix this problem. Now, as you can see right now, I've got kind of a time lapse going of how to remove the front bumper cover. Now don't worry, this video is not intended to show you how to do that. So rather than go through that all again, here's what I want you to do. I want you to click the subscribe button so you can easily come back to this video. And now up in the top right hand corner of your screen, I've got a link to my previous video on how to remove the front bumper cover. So that's a much more detailed look at this, and I want you to go ahead and watch that before you start if you've never had the front bumper cover off. I'll also leave a link to this video down in the description below. So once you get that front bumper cover off, come back to this video and I'll show you how to pull the headlight out, and also how to fix the moisture issue. So this video has literally been over 4 years in the making. I applied the fix you're about to see over 4 years ago, and I have not had a drop of moisture in my headlights since. So now that we've got this front bumper cover pulled off yet again, let's talk about how to pull the headlight module out and talk about the fix itself. Okay, so we're going to use this passenger side headlight as our example today, and there are about 3 10mm bolts that will have to come out in order to pull the headlight out. So the first one's quite obvious, it's up front here. And the second one is on down here on the bottom edge of the headlight, right here. Another 10mm. And the final 10mm bolt is up here on the top of the headlight, but we'll have to remove this one small piece of trim. Got a little push clip right here, and a second one back here in the back. And then it just pulls straight off. And now you can see the third 10mm bolt. And don't forget when you're tightening these back up to just snug them up. Everything on this headlight is plastic, so you don't want to break any tabs or clips or anything. Okay, and this next part's a teeny bit tricky. I'm going to be really careful to not break the plastic tab up top, but it does need to be released to release the headlight. So there's this little guy right here, and that's basically what's holding the headlight on. And so this plastic could be brittle, so we want to try not to break it. So we want to carefully lift up on the back edge of this plastic. Alright, now we should be ready to pull the whole headlight out. And then we just have this electrical connection here. And that one hole connection releases all the wiring going to the headlight. Alright, so here's the headlight module, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on here, why these fail, and how to fix it. So these headlights are comprised of two halves. You have the lens, the clear part here, and then you have the back of the taillight, this black plastic here. And so there's a seam between these two halves. And that's the problem. You know, I've seen a lot of things online where people will drill holes in the bottom to try to release the moisture and the condensation, or even glue up these back panels. These, by the way, are what twist off to get to the bulbs, so you can twist these off and get to the bulbs. So they'll put glue around these and everything else. The problem is the glue or adhesive that they have used to join these two pieces together. It dries out and deteriorates and lets the moisture in that's running down your hood or running down the side of the car. And so in order to stop the moisture from getting inside the headlight, we need to get this seal sealed back up. And so the first and most important thing to do is to get the existing moisture out of the headlight. And so the way you want to do that is, first thing you want to do is go ahead and remove these two caps here. And it'll show you which way to lock and unlock them, but it's just righty-tighty, lefty-loosey type of thing. And they just simply pull off just like this. But you want to take these both off, both of these covers, and you want to put this whole module in your house somewhere, or in a dry location, and let the things air out. Now you can expedite this process a little bit by putting a shop vac to kind of circulate the air. So you have the put the shop vac in one of these holes, and kind of put an old rag around it to kind of seal it up, and that'll pull air through the headlight. But really, ideally, you want this to be sitting in your home or a very dry location, and airing out for at least 24 hours, and make sure all the moisture is out of it. You'll need some time with these off the car anyway to allow the fix that we're going to talk about here in a minute to take hold to dry. One other tip, if you want to find out where the leak is, or to confirm that the seal is what's leaking, what I did, and I'll show a video of it here in a minute, you may have already seen it on my channel here. This area right here where these wires go in is a little rubber grommet, and you can actually pull the edge of that back a little bit, there's just enough room where you can slide in a needle that you would use to fill a basketball with air, and hook that up to your air compressor and kind of wedge that down in there, and run some air through it, and spray the seam with something like Windex or some soap and water, something that'll bubble, and that will show you where the leaks are, just like you can see in this video that I've got up on the screen right now. Okay, let's talk about the fix. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to remove some things that are going to be in your way. This piece of plastic trim right here, you can see it's just clipped in place right here and right here, and so pull that off. And then there's also a black piece of trim that runs over the seam, and you can see these clips here. Now I'm not going to try to remove this because I've already done this repair, and it would be difficult at this point to remove it. But you want to remove carefully because they might be brittle. You want to pull these clips back and peel this plastic trim piece back, and you can see it comes all the way around this other side as well, and it's just held in place by these clips, and you can pop it out carefully so that you can see the entire seam. And so then what you're going to want to do is go to somewhere like an auto parts store and buy a tube of RTV silicone. So I actually bought 2 tubes of it, and one tube was enough to do both headlights. So this is the spare tube from 4 years ago when I did this repair. And I mean, I'm sure that any type of clear RTV silicone will work well. I think I picked this up at AutoZone. I think it was about $8 or so. So this is a very cheap repair. So once you've got all these two plastic trim pieces removed, you should have access to the entire seam. And so we'll use this side as an example here, since we can actually see the seam. And you can see the bead of RTV silicone that I ran and filled this void with. The most important part, in my opinion, to get right is this top edge here, because this is the edge that is exposed to all the heat from the sun. This is the edge that runs across the hood. So you want to go ahead and make sure that you fill that in well, and that's why this trim piece has to come off in order to be able to access the entire seam. And you know, at this point it would be difficult for me to show you how to remove that because we went ahead and pushed this piece back on while the adhesive was still had not cured. So it's stuck on there pretty good. Now if we needed to, I could get it all. And so you want to go the full perimeter of the light. You can see where we went up here. And like I mentioned before, we did this 4 years ago, and I have not had a drip of condensation in these lights. Before this repair, my headlights looked pretty much like your headlights did. We would get condensation inside here all the time. Once you get the entire perimeter sealed back up, you do want to let it cure the maximum time they recommend. This brand recommends 24 hours. And like I said, this is a good time to have the backs off, the back covers off of the headlight, and to allow it to dry out. If I recall correctly, I actually let these headlights dry out for a couple of days. So it was, I did it over the Christmas break. So the house was warm and dry because we were running the heat. And I had a couple of days where I didn't have to drive because we were home for the holidays. So yeah, unfortunately, realistically, you're going to have to be without your car for a day or two. But the more dry air you can introduce into the headlights, the better, to get all that moisture out of there. Because sealing them up is great, but if you don't get all the moisture out, you're still going to see the condensation where it just creates a little miniature weather environment inside your headlight. And don't forget too, that if the seal is dirty, before you glue it up, you want to wipe it down real good, get it nice and clean, so that the silicone adheres to it. But knock on wood, we did this repair 4 years ago to both headlights, and I have yet to see any new moisture or any moisture at all come into these headlights. Just hit 100,000 miles on this vehicle today. It's a 2010, so you know, 9+-year-old car, and this repair has held up well. You know, if I ever had to redo it, you know, you could just simply scrape out the old silicone and apply fresh stuff, but so far this has worked better than whatever GM used to adhere these two halves together. Now I have seen things online where you can actually bake the headlights and separate the two halves and put in new adhesive between the two halves. You know, that scares me. You know, putting these, you know, $1,000 headlights into an oven, and you know, I guess if you do that every day, great. But this fix is cheap, quick, and it works, and it's a much less risky fix. And real quick, just because I get asked about these all the time, the little LED strips that are on my car above the fog lights, they come as just a plastic piece of trim that replaces the factory one. And so that snaps on the outside of the vehicle. The snaps are here on the inside. One there and a couple more over here. And so the fog light itself is a separate piece. That's just a piece of trim on the front. And so those LED strips, they've got their own little wiring harness that come out, and that's the same on both that side as well as the other side. And what I did to wire them up, you can see here is the wiring harness that it came with, and I just routed that back here behind the bumper and zip tied it to this existing wiring harness, and it just comes up back behind here. And this right here was an existing ground post, and you can see where I've tied into it. And then the power, and there's actually a little box that comes with it, a little transformer box. If you look closely, I've just set it right back here in front of the existing fuse box. It's just hanging out there. And you can see where I've tied it into an existing fuse here with one of these little things that lets me keep a fuse on it. And so the one that I tied into was number 7 here, and I don't remember what that is, but what I can tell you is it's a 15 amp, so it's plenty of headroom for the for these low draw LEDs, and this turns on when the car turns on and turns off when the car turns off. And actually, now I remember, that little fuse block add-in I bought has two fuses, so one for the existing and one for what I've added. So it looks like I left the 15 in there for the factory one and added a 10 for the 10 amp for the LEDs. And then finally, I just came back here and snipped the wire to the existing daylight running lamps because these LEDs replace that. Okay, that about does it for all the information on how to fix this problem yourself. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk briefly about GM finally at least somewhat acknowledging there is a problem. Now, I've seen a lot of buzz here lately about letters going out from GM to certain owners about the headlight issue. In fact, some people have even tossed around the word recall. So let's make it clear, this is not a recall, unfortunately. I wish it was. Generally speaking, a recall is a safety-related issue, which this is, but it's something that involves the government getting involved with the manufacturer, in this case GM. And so, and the letters would go out to a whole lot more people than they're going out to now. And we'll talk a little bit more about why only a few are going out, or only in select locations, here in a minute. But this isn't an example of an actual GM recall letter. I mean, you'll notice that it says your vehicle is involved in emission recall 15594. So I mean, it's very clearly a recall. So that's one way that this is different. The letter that's going out does not about the headlights does not mention the word recall or recall number, and then there's another big difference, and that has to do with how the job is paid for or not paid for, and we'll get to that here in a second. Okay, and so here is why GM is finally at least acknowledging the issue with our Cadillacs. There was actually a class action lawsuit against GM, and it was recently settled on January 8th of this year. So that's why all of a sudden this is back in the news, and why these letters are going out. So it says General Motors has agreed to settle allegations that the headlights in 2010 to 2015 Cadillac SRX vehicles have a defect that causes the headlights to prematurely wear out and fail. So, Now, what's interesting to me is 2010 to 2015. I'm not sure why the 16 was left out of that. As far as I know, there's no differences between the 2010 through 2016 headlights. So, unless there was some sort of redesign that I haven't heard about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, that's bizarre that they've left that the final production year of the second generation out of this lawsuit. So, alleged that seals used in class action headlights exterior housing units wear out and deteriorate, allowing moisture to accumulate and condense from the air that flows through their vents. So yeah, talking about exactly what we talked about earlier about the seals and them wearing out. So anyway, and it goes on to explain what's happening and pooling condensation causing the headlights to malfunction. Yeah, so in more extreme cases, you actually would have water not just condensing on the inside of the lens, but actually, I've seen some pictures floating around of, an inch or so of water in the bottom of the headlight. And this can cause, obviously, the components to fail, the bulbs, ballasts, if you have the HID headlights, and so it can get quite expensive, and in most cases, the whole headlight module just has to be replaced. And so here's another difference of where this is different from a regular recall. So number one, they will, if you can show that you paid for out-of-pocket expenses for replacing these headlights, they will basically refund you or reimburse you up to $1,600 per replacement. So that's not super different. Some recalls will actually, have a section in there that says if you've had this already repaired, we'll reimburse you. But where the difference is how they want you to address it if you have not had the repairs done yet. Okay, so I have not received the letter personally. Now, I live in Georgia, and from what I understand, since the lawsuit was settled in California and Florida, that only owners in California and Florida are getting these letters, and not even all of them. I've seen, some stuff that suggests that, you might be able to take advantage of this if your car was originally sold or leased in Florida or California, but sounds like it's going to be a pain to get them to cooperate. Anyway, so I have not received the letter, but I do have a copy of the letter here. And so here we go again. This letter is intended to make you aware that GM believes a small number of 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015 SRXs, again, leaving out the 2016s, that's a mystery to me, may experience issues that could cause moisture to accumulate in their headlamp capsules. May experience it? I mean, come on, guys. Almost everyone is experiencing these issues. We are writing because your satisfaction with Cadillac products is important to us. Well, that's just so nice. And so they go on to explain that they'll reimburse you for out-of-pocket. But here's where it gets kind of weird. So they're talking about the prior replacement costs. If you have not had it repaired yet, though, basically what this is saying is that you will more or less have to go in and have it diagnosed by a Cadillac dealership and basically pay out of pocket for the repairs and then get reimbursed. Okay, so you've got to basically gamble the money up front in order to get reimbursed. So if you haven't had the repairs done yet, they're not going to just do them for free until you've already had it done. So it's only a reimbursement type of thing. So that's definitely where it differs from a recall, in that with a recall, you don't have to pay anything up front. So even if you haven't had it done yet, and they diagnose it as dealership diagnoses it as being defective, you're going to have to pay out of pocket and then wait for GM to approve and reimburse you. So that seems like kind of a big gamble to me, especially since
the cost of each of these headlights can get quite expensive, especially if yours is the upper level trims with the HIDs and the headlights that level and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, if you've already had it done and you're already out that money, I mean, sure, I would probably try to take advantage of this. If you haven't yet and you're handy and the video you just watched looks like something you can handle, I think I'd much rather spend $5 and run some silicone around the seals. So that's what the first part of the letter looks like. And here's what the second page of this letter looks like, showing what you have to, the documentation that you have to send to them, and talking about if you want to go ahead and request a diagnosis. And you've got 90 days. Basically, when you get this letter, you have 90 days to get it diagnosed and replace them. And here we go. If you request a diagnosis and or headlamp replacement, you will need to initially pay the dealer for any diagnostic charges and or replacement costs. But GM will reimburse you for these payments if you submit a claim form and release the dealer repair order to the address contained in this letter, showing payment for eligible charges within 90 days of this letter. General Motors will reimburse you for all these charges in full, subject to the $1,600 cap. And blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, basically what we were just talking about. You got to foot the bill and hope all this pans out. I mean, I would say that, if you're going through the dealership and, you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's, you'll be okay. But that's a lot of money. And then finally, just the final page where you're going to fill out all the information, and you are basically, signing off that if you're doing this, you're not going to sue GM over it or, hold them liable for anything about this issue ever again. And, that brings up a really good point. Has GM come up with a better version of these headlights? I doubt it. I mean, are the ones they put in going to last any longer than the new ones? I mean, do they have a redesign on this? I mean, so are you going to be in the same situation in a few years? And I've not seen anything to suggest that they have a redesigned or an improved version of these headlights. In fact, there's a very good odds that the ones you get are ones that have been sitting on a shelf forever anyway. I mean, are they still even making these headlights at this point? Hard to say. I mean, I guess the 2016s are still under factory warranty for a little while longer, so maybe there's new ones still being manufactured. I don't really know. But what I will tell you is that the $5 fix that we discussed earlier in this video have lasted over 4 years in the sitting out in the southern heat all day behind my office. So, we have just as much luck of that working, if not better luck, than getting another pair of these defective lights. And that about does it for this video. Hope you guys found it interesting and helpful. And as always, I would appreciate if you consider subscribing. And we'll see you with the next SRX video.